So Sony decided to once more step on a rake and then shove their whole face into a hornet's nest, all while walking on a bunch of Lego pieces, and then they just refuse to talk about it. Basically, what's happened is that Sony has been caught up in a new scandal tied to DRM debates, always online debates. DRM, if you're not familiar, is digital rights management software, and it's basically what companies use to combat things like piracy or return abuses where people will buy things, for example, on like stolen credit cards, and then they buy it, then they refund it. And like there's all sorts of shenanigans that happens that DRM is aimed to combat, but predominantly it's to try and combat piracy, quote unquote, which is a very broad thing, but that's at least what they claim it's for. But they issued an update where basically what seemed to happen is that for new digital purchases that you make through PlayStation, if your console does not connect to the internet for 30 days, your license is effectively revoked. So like you could buy a copy of a game and then you sit on it for a month, your console's disconnected for a month or whatever. And even though you bought the game, you download it and everything, it just will not boot if that 30-day timer passes without it checking with a server to verify, which obviously is like a nightmare when it comes to digital right or digital content preservation and games preservation. Like the example I have been thinking about constantly is PT. Actually, PT, if you somehow don't remember, PT playable teaser. This was the teaser for Hideo Kojima's Silent Hill game that never ended up seeing the light of day and was canceled, but people still will sell their PS4s that have PT installed on it, and like this is still something that regularly is trading in the marketplace because this digital copy of the game still exists on this hardware. You cannot re-download it because it was unlisted from the PlayStation Store. So just because it exists on this console and you cannot re-download it, this becomes like a capsule to preserve PT as a game effectively. And so people will collect them. Like people will collect them specifically. You can see all they've got on here is PT, it seems. And that's it. But people are willing to buy it just to collect and have this little piece of gaming history. Under these new rules, it appears that this would no longer work. This just the console would basically delist this, deactivate your license to that thing from the PlayStation Store, and this would be lost forever, which is naturally why people are pretty pissy about it. But far from taking Twitter's word for it, our friend Spawnwave, I've been on his show with him, really cool guy, really awesome. He sat down and decided to test some of this himself, and he found some interesting information that is concerning. So buckle up.
Right now on this Sony PlayStation 5, PlayStation 4 DRM situation. And while I know people are talking about PS4, there's certainly a lot of concern, I'd say, generated more towards the PlayStation 5. But people are still kind of unsure as to what is happening right now with this and if it's actually a thing. So I figured, you know what, while people are testing it, we can run our own test here right now. And there are a few other things I wanted to check along with this. And fortunately, with the PS5 Pro, it's pretty easy to get the CMOS battery, so this will make this a fairly quick process, but we'll take a look at that here today. So if you guys enjoyed the video, hit the like button.
I shut it accidentally. Happily. So the CMOS battery, if you are not tech savvy, which is fine if you're not, the CMOS battery is basically what you use for like...
There's a lot of discussion.
It's what you use for like internal time tracking. So it's almost like a watch battery. Like, I don't know if you can actually see if I turn off, if I move my candles, you can see that there's a little CMOS, you can't. There's a little battery in the computer case, like on the motherboard, that's actually used to maintain an internal clock. So it tracks the daily, like, date, time, hours, everything. So even when your computer shut off, it can still keep track of the date. Same thing is happening within the PS5 and PS5 Pro. And that is important because, again, when we're talking about digital rights stuff, if you're disconnected from the internet, that's one aspect of this. But if your console, imagine it's disconnected and it's put in storage or something. And so people are just not touching it. People are not using it. Like, you should still have the game that you bought I don't think that's like a controversial thing to say, you know? I don't think that's that controversial, but apparently it is. So he's going to experiment with removing that CMOS battery, which will effectively cause the PS5 to not know what day or what year or what time it is. And you would hope that it would still allow you to have the games that you bought, right? So that's effectively what he's trying and experimenting with and seeing if it changes anything
on the PlayStation 4 for each game. So what I wanted to do was check out a couple of recently purchased games, a digital game that I've had for a bit, which we can fire up, I guess, Crimson Desert. That
I just realized my chat was covering his face.
And then I also have a disc-based game, just to make sure, because I saw some people bring that up. The question of, hold on a minute, is this the C-bomb situation again? Did Sony do something and it kind of messed up something in the back end for the PlayStation network, and also disc-based games are affected? We can quickly figure that out with Pragmata actually in the system right now. So let's take a look at the games that I have picked up. I grabbed Saint Slayer. This is just an hour ago. So. And then I also picked up Vampire Crawlers. Okay. So both fairly cheap games. I am actually pretty interested in Saint Slayer and keep.
The key is that he just bought these. So these are not old games on your account. These are new ones that he just bought.
Keep an eye on that. Should be a lot of fun. As they said, NES-style 2D action game. Looks very similar to Castlevania, although I don't think they can say like Castlevania. So that should be a lot of fun there. So the idea, since I am connected to the internet, this should just fire up and have no problem. And indeed, we're seeing it start up right away. And this would have at least some kind of error message immediately. If there was a problem starting up. So that looks good. And then we'll also fire up Vampire Crawlers.
Okay.
That is firing up without any issue as expected. I am connected to the internet. There should be no problems. Even if I'm not, I would also be in the 30-day check-in window. Here's Crimson Desert. I will fire that up just to be sure. That's kind of our control group, as I bought that, of course, when it came out last month. And also firing up without any issues here. And then finally, I will go back and I'll fire up the disc-based Pragmata game, just so we can see that all the games load up here, no problem, connect to the internet. Good game, by the way. If you have not played Pragmata, completely recommend it.
Honest question, is it Pragmata or Pragmata? This is like Nier Automata. I never know how to say it.
Finished it up earlier today.
Pragmata.
So, the hunt for the platinum, I don't know. We'll see, because that you got to go back through on lunatic mode, and I was a little disappointed that it wasn't New Game Plus unlocks lunatic mode to go back through with all your cool stuff. But either way, there's still more to do. And anyway, everything here looks good. So now what? What do we have to do to simulate, say, your licenses being broken and being outside of that 30-day window? See, because you can't just check this window, since there is no there's no timer here, as you see with the PlayStation 4, and I can move myself there for a second. Everything there looks fine, right? I also want to show that, just be thorough, when offline here currently, if I go over, I can still launch Saint Slayer again, because I fit into that 30-day window. At this point. So everything looks good there. We do now need to break the licensing and kind of simulate being out of that 30-day window. In order to do that, we got to pull the CMOS battery. As I mentioned, they made this pretty easy, so I can kind of like show and tell style this thing with our little CMOS battery door.
It's so cute.
With one Phillips head screw, the battery comes right up, and that should now have reset our licenses. So now I just need to turn the system on, leave it disconnected from the internet, and we'll see if we can load up any of those newer games. All right, back to the dashboard. The time, you can see, is all messed up. It's supposed to be just after 4 p.m. Eastern, and it thinks it's 7 o'clock. Yeah, you can see it's defaulted back to 2011, 12/31/2011, 7:01 p.m., which if I did connect to the internet, it would fix the date, the time, any of that. But with that in mind, let's see what happens here when we try to fire up Saint Slayer. And there you go. Can't use this content. Can't connect to the server. To verify your license, wait a while and then try again. Okay, so Saint Slayer does not work. Vampire Crawlers, same deal. Can't use this content. Can't connect to the server to verify your license. Okay, wait a while and try again. With that in mind, Crimson Desert, again, picked that up when once it came out, more than a month ago now. And we picked that guy. Yeah, looks like that one fires up no problem. Digital game. The whole idea is that this situation that's going on right now with the license check is not being retroactively applied. So any of your current digital games should not have this issue popping up. We can see offline with CMOS reset, the whole thing. The license is not broken for Crimson Desert. Okay,
Crimson Desert goated.
Let's go back and
so let me be clear. This is one of those things that, it's true, does not affect probably 99% of players, okay? The vast majority of people will have their consoles connected to the internet. They will have their consoles connected to the servers, you know, regularly to check licenses. So they would never notice this. Like, honestly, if this was not being called out by people, I don't think many people would notice or pick up on it, period. But like, as with many things like this, the typical frustration comes from like the long-term implications of this, because I, for one, have like a PS4 Pro in my closet, which was my primary console back during that era. It still has games installed on it. It still has my stuff on it. And it's something I can plug in a year, in 2 years, whatever. And it's going to boot up, have my stuff on there, and I can just immediately use it. The reason why people are perturbed by this is because under these new rules, these games would not be able to be preserved in that way. It effectively means that you are buying, as they describe it, just a license. You're not buying the software, downloading it, and then it's yours to use. You have a timer on a constant checkup for your games. Now, since this has come out, there's been some further exploration, some further experimentation, trying to figure out what's going on. It seems like this primarily was done in response to an exploit that some people were using to basically buy a game and then refund it while still owning the copy of the game. So effectively, like, somebody even in chat just described it. Yeah, so like Chris Gotaku, I read the DRM issue is about the PS4 being jailbroken, where they can extract the digital license or something, being able to do a refund of the game being recently bought and still keeping the game. Effectively, what you, and I think broad strokes, that's correct. What you were able to do effectively was to buy a game through the store, and then you would, with a jailbroken console, you'd be able to go and refund the game while keeping the digital license in place. And you can basically disconnect the console from the store's ability to check the license, and because it didn't have a constant check on the license, you could refund the game, get your money back, but you still have the game, right? Which obviously PlayStation doesn't like, and it is an exploit. It is something they wanted to fix. My point, and I think the frustration for many other people, is that this is a fix that is so broad that it actually does a lot more damage than good, I think, because once again, it seemingly just completely eliminates the rights of consumers that bought the product and want to keep it. It makes it so you have to do regular checks on this. There are still questions, though, about whether the license will switch, and this is where some of the debate is. So specifically, whether after a certain period of time the license switches from a temporary, quote-unquote temporary one to a permanent one. So AW Monopoly Man, for example, posted this, and apparently after 14 to 16 days, as in once a refund period is up, then they silently switch your license to a permanent one where that thing we just saw would no longer apply. So this would specifically be during the return window to make it so you couldn't just refund it and then try to keep the game after getting your money back. As you can see here, there's some people, this looks like reset era, I think so. I mentioned earlier, or in an earlier thread, how I had a game that was affected by this, which subsequently fixed itself. I've been doing some further testing to try and understand what is happening. I have a jailbroken PS4, so I can poke around things behind the scenes. Here's what I found about how licensing seems to work on the PS4. The PS4 will install a license file for all of the content your account owns, regardless of whether or not that content is actually installed. This is a key point if it is true that they are addressing a license exploit. This happens automatically, so if I buy a game on the PlayStation Store website and then turn on my PS4, the license for that recent purchase is automatically installed. Whether or not you can actually use the license for the game is then further controlled by the activation state of your console, i.e. is it set to primary for offline play, or whether you're online and connected to PSN in the case of non-primary consoles. In either case, those license files always seem to be present. These license files are valid for an indefinite amount of time for content content you own outright, 14 days for content from PlayStation Plus Extra and Premium, and for the duration of your subscription for PlayStation Plus Essential games. What has changed now is that new purchases are not being automatically issued a license file with an indefinite duration. Instead, a 30-day license is issued. I have 2 recent purchased games I've been able to test this with. Game 1 I purchased on April 9th, turned on the PS4 on April 21st, and a 30-day license for the game was automatically installed. I then installed the game on the 25th of April. The information screen confirmed the game was only playable offline for another 26 days. Approximately 30 minutes after installing the game, the license had been replaced with one, which is valid for an indefinite amount of time, and this remains the case even if I delete and reinstall the game. So that is 16 days between the initial purchase and the license showing as being eligible for permanent offline play. Game 2 I purchased yesterday, April 27th, and I installed the same day. Again, 30-day license for the game was installed. Unlike the first game, no permanent license has been issued yet. So why is one game behaving differently than the other? The obvious thing which stands out is length of time since purchased. I've owned the first game for 16 days, which put it outside of PSN's 14-day refund window. So I'm speculating that perhaps people were exploiting the fact that you could purchase a game, grab the indefinite license file for the thing off of an exploitable PS4, and then refund the purchase. And Sony is currently mitigating this issue by time limiting the initial license that you are issued. In lieu of actual information from Sony, perhaps we can do some community detective work to validate this, etc., etc. That's basically the claim, is that this seems to be tied to the refund window. Shinobu AF says this claims that you will get a real license after 14 days. However, multiple people who were testing this DRM tried games bought over 14 days ago and still get blocked. So this is not true. Now they're changing the narrative after 30 days, which just sounds like a cope to defend Sony. And then this one specifically says, he quotes this post and says, I tested this with my digital copy of RE Requiem that I purchased on April 10th with PS5 Pro with CMOS removed and disconnected from the internet, and it still works. Seems like this person's finding is correct, that it switches to permanent license after 2 weeks, which would verify or at least heavily suggest that this seems to be an attempt to address an issue with refund exploits for jailbroken consoles, where you basically jailbreak it, you can access the license files that you can't normally get access to. They just copy that, refund it, copy back over the license file. They have access to the game then, even though they haven't effectively paid for it. They got their refund. So you can see Destin's retweet of this, or quote tweet of this. Breaking on the PlayStation DRM issue, one community member thinks they figured it out. It's a way to protect the license exploit. You buy a new game, DRM is installed for 30 days. Once the return window is up, DRM is removed. You have the permanent license. I saw some people complaining about breaking things, so I'm going to do it all the time now. Or the breaking thing, breaking news. And here's where I'm at. I think that it probably makes sense that they were trying to fix an exploit that they've been meaning to fix for like a decade at this point. My frustration is still that it seems too broad to me. And I think that they're fixing something. Like, realistically, how often is this being utilized? Like, let's be totally honest. Is this like a common thing? I think I vaguely remember hearing something about jailbroken consoles being able to kind of game copies of games. But let's be real. Is that happening like what? 100 times, 1,000 times? Like what, how often is this happening? Like, I don't think it's that common, first of all. And so you're putting something in that is potentially going to harm long-term game preservation to try and save 500 copies or 1,000 copies of games from exploits and jailbreakers, you know, from around the world. I just don't see this as like a super common problem. Maybe I am wrong. Maybe it is super, super common, especially elsewhere in the world. Maybe it's really common overseas and I'm just not familiar with it. But it seems like a very, very niche problem, for one. Two, even if this is totally like, even if you agree that the solution is fine and all of that, I think we can all agree that PlayStation's complete silence on the issue and lack of clarity and transparency is a problem. Like, the fact that this is being left up to internet sleuths to test this stuff is just insane. Like, it really should not be this difficult to find out what the hell is going on with a problem like this. It just seems insane to me. It's the norm to jailbreak in Latin America. Is that true? Do we have people from Latin America that could speak on this? I mean, I know that there's a lot of issues with game pricing, for example, in Latin America, so that wouldn't surprise me. But I think that it just reminds me once more of the Gabe Newell quote on piracy, which is just a fundamental difference in how they deal with it. The easiest way to stop piracy is not by putting anti-piracy technology to work. It's by giving those people a service that's better than what they're receiving from the pirates. There's all sorts of downsides to jailbreaking your console, and not the least of which is massive problems with online like server issues, whether you want to play multiplayer games, whether you want to access the store regularly. Like, my understanding is that jailbreaking your console, it's kind of like you probably should have a backup console effectively, but to be fair, I've not done it myself. But Gabe's approach has always just been like, if somebody is pirating a game, it's because there's some problem they're trying to get around. Like, if somebody is pirating a game, it's because it's so expensive in their native country that it's just prohibitively expensive. And so they want to be able to play the game. They want to be able to participate in the industry, but it is there's a massive problem in the way, a hurdle. So Gabe's approach has just been to, instead of trying to rule with an iron fist, he's like, okay, well, let's figure out what the problem is and just make it way more convenient to be an actual customer and a way better experience. And so we'll effectively put the pirates out of business by way of like competition, which is kind of brilliant. Like treating piracy, which is sort of a way of getting around the marketplace, but combating piracy with a free market approach of just being like, yeah, well, we'll do something even better than they can. And people will choose to work with Steam and use Steam instead of piracy because it's just a better overall experience. We'll put things on deep sales. We'll adjust dynamic pricing for, regional conversion rates to make them more reasonable. So you're not paying effectively $500 for a single copy of a game and stuff like that. And I think that's a much better approach than just trying to rule with an iron fist where you end up punishing people who haven't done anything wrong and maybe just want to be able to preserve their games, just want to be able to not worry about licensing fees. And then the third aspect of all of this is just that, I don't tend to find slippery slope arguments particularly compelling because I feel like you can apply it to pretty much everything. Literally anything is a slippery slope. I remember seeing a video from the 70s or 80s? I think it was 80s, when they first in the US mandated seatbelts and seatbelts in cars. And I remember seeing a news clipping of it where people were raging, being like, this is a slippery slope towards communism. First, they tell us that we have to pay income taxes, and now they're telling us we have to wear a belt over us while we're driving in America. But before long, they're going to be coming into my house and making sure that all of my furniture is the way they like, I just think you can apply it to everything. But in this case, I think the slippery slope is a valid concern to have, because if Sony sees that they can kind of get away with timed licensing, DRM in their games on their consoles, there is nothing stopping them from making that more aggressive as the years tick by, which I think we all would kind of expect that they probably would make it more aggressive as time goes by. Wallet the Great sent a super chat, says, oh, it is common, specifically jailbreaking and doing these exploits. I live in a third world country, Nigeria, and there are stores that do this regularly here. Almost all of the friends I have get their latest games through this method, says Wallet the Great. That's fascinating. Interesting. Real Serious says it's not much of the norm now in South America, but the Xbox 360 was a super popular console. You could use pirated CDs on it versus with the PS3. The PS2 was and is also huge. That's fascinating. Well, and I guess going back to Gabe's comment, if this is directly a response to like license exploitation with jailbroken consoles in Southern America or in Nigeria, do you really think that like you locking this down is going to lead to those people being able to magically now afford like the ridiculous conversion rate cost of the game? It's like the cost of games in Brazil, for example, is ungodly. And hardware in Brazil is ungodly. Let me just look it up. Let's actually see it. Let's just actually see it. Take a look. Okay. Yeah, it's 7,500 Brazilian real. And according to this calculator, that's about $1,500 for a PS5 Pro. And copies of games are also insane. So do you think like locking down this exploit is magically going to get them? Like going back to Gabe's approach, it's like maybe instead of this, you should just find a way to make the games not ridiculously expensive. Like maybe that's the solution. Maybe people will buy your games and buy your consoles and not feel the need. Like you should be asking truly, why do people feel the need to go through all of these hoops and to deal with all these hassles of jailbreaking and doing all this stuff through the back door? Why are they doing that instead of just buying it? Is it because they just like, why is that a problem in Brazil but not in the US? Why is that a problem there but not in Canada? It seems to me it's probably because the conversion rates and how much you're charging there is ridiculous. And so maybe it's better to just lower the price and lower your margin on it and make it more approachable to those people instead of trying to just brute force it this way. Call me crazy. Call me crazy. Sorry, it started the video. So all of this is going down naturally. There's much debating and gnashing of teeth over it. I think even if you don't seem to find this particularly frustrating or concerning, you should agree that Sony should at the very least be much more transparent with what's going on here. They've been really silent about it, just hoping it blows over. And even if it is just an oopsie, we were trying to fix an exploit and it made all these problems. If they came out and just said, yeah, after the refund period, it'll switch over to a permanent license and that's our commitment that it'll stay there. Like that would be one thing. There'd still be people, frustrated and upset by it because it is, one more step closer to full DRM. But at least there wouldn't be all this confusion. But because they're trying to be so quiet about it, it gives the impression that they're trying to just be sneaky about it, which doesn't feel good. Doesn't feel good. Real Serious says another shout out to Steam because they have recommended regional pricing, which can check on third-party sites to see if it matches the current price. And now we can check the pricing history too. Well, again, it's just that difference in philosophy. It's this idea of, well, we could try to find a way to make our product more viable in that market versus what this effectively is, which is just to lock it down even more. So it's like, hey, people feel the need to steal this product from us. Instead of asking why do they feel the need to steal it, let's address that. And like the root cause, they're choosing to just bypass it and just like, okay, we'll just put them in jail even longer. Like they're just choosing to try and rule with an iron fist instead of understanding the real problem at the core of all of it. So anyway, with all of this kind of laid out on the table, there's still things that are being updated. People are figuring out more and more stuff. Like I said, it's a constantly kind of evolving story because PlayStation is not talking about it. So people are trying to figure it out themselves. As of yesterday, we were at one spot. Now we have a better understanding of it. And it does seem to be specifically something intended to address this exploit from jailbroken consoles. I don't think that magically makes it okay, but it at least explains why it's functioning the way that it is. I still think that PlayStation should disclose it, discuss it. I think that it is certainly a slippery slope. And I think at the end of the day, it fundamentally will not magically fix things for Sony. I don't think you're going to see a super spike in console or in game sales in those markets because those people weren't buying the games to begin with through legitimate means for a reason. It's because they were ungodly expensive where they are because of the conversion rates. It's because the pirates, quote unquote, had a better product for them than the actual marketplace had for them. And instead of taking the Gabe Newell Steam approach of trying to make the marketplace healthier and give them a better product than the pirates, they're choosing to go the opposite way, which I think is bad and stupid and won't actually fix the problem that they're faced with. So yeah. Sony can do whatever they want and get away with it because people are still going to buy GTA 6 on PS5. And like I said at the top, let's be totally honest. If people didn't find out about this through like Twitter and YouTube and all that, they probably would not have noticed. It probably would have kicked up and certainly created a stir where this exploit is used heavily, sure. But I don't think the story would have gone anywhere near as viral because I think a lot of people do have their consoles connected to the internet and are like at least once a month, their console is able to check with the server. So even if it was like the worst case scenario where it doesn't convert to a permanent license after 2 weeks, I still think a lot of people probably wouldn't notice because the average gamer, again, like we got to back up and remember the games industry is massive. The average gamer is like the Madden, FIFA, Call of Duty, Fortnite, Roblox player. That's the average when you consider the millions and millions and millions of players out there. And those people, yeah, their games are always online. Their games are require connections to the internet. So they would have no problem with this. They would never notice an issue, which is why they can probably get away with it. But as with most things, it's usually not the more casual consumer that creates the most fuss over problematic decisions from companies. Like even things like right to repair. The average consumer is not that upset about right to repair, but they certainly benefit from right to repair being a policy or a mandated policy within certain marketplaces. They end up benefiting from it, even if in the short term they don't particularly care. So the people who are really passionate about this, again, you may not think it's a big deal right now, but in 5 years, in 10 years, when the PS5 is a legacy product, and these games are, eventually the servers will be shut off, just as they were for OG consoles and networks. You want to be able to preserve your games and still be able to play them. I mean, imagine in its original form. Again, it looks like now, after 2 weeks, it converts to a permanent license. We won't know until 2 weeks have passed fully from when this was put in place, when we can like fully test it without doing without doing the actual battery swap. But I mean, like, imagine if you bought your PS5, it's been sitting in your closet just like my PS4 Pro has, and then I plug it in because it's been disconnected from the internet for more than 30 days, and all of those games are unplayable. And if they shut down the servers, as they've done with many older consoles, you would never be able to validate those licenses, and those games would just be unplayable forever. Even though they're literally installed on your console, it's just unplayable because it can't check with a server that no longer exists. So DRM sucks a poopy, and it's trying to fix a problem that I don't think it's equipped to solve, and I think it's stupid. So yeah, no thanks. I'll just buy on GOG and Steam. Yeah, GOG, they're the goats when it comes to it. I mean, they're even better than Steam is with a lot of the DRM stuff. But yeah, I think, again, PC gaming, hard to beat. He took my thing.